And this is just going to be a public discussion right now. After we get through with this, we're going to go on city council meeting whenever this gets over with tonight. But the first part of this session is just discussion on the sales tax reallocation that we've been talking about. We've got 4 people here at the front of the counter. I'll let them introduce themselves in just a minute. But let's go to word of prayer. Ellie, you want to listen to word of prayer?
Sir, Jesus, thank you for your goodness, your kindness to us, Lord. You've treated Glenwood so good these years. You treated us good. We appreciate you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Go ahead and say pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a distinguished front panel here in front of us. I'm going to start with Andy down here and let him introduce herself down.
I'm Andy Franks with A.L. Franks Engineering. We provide engineering services for the city.
And I'm Michael Moyers with Eldredge Clark out of Little Rock. We're a law firm that provides bond counsel services to the city, and we're here to help make sure that the ballot is worded in a way to fulfill the city's wishes. So.
My name is Sarah Giammo. I'm also an attorney at Eldredge Clark.
And my name is Jason Holsclaw. I'm the Senior Vice President at Stevens Inc., and we advise on financial matters related to municipal bond issues and sales tax.
Okay, before we get started, there's been some stuff posted on Facebook that I wanted to address so everybody would get a clear understanding of this before we get into the discussion of that. One, the purpose of A.L. Franks Engineering and why we need A.L. Franks Engineering. The city has bid at 3 different times that I know of for engineers, put out specs, and asked for engineering firms to come and to the city of Glenwood submit their credentials. And NRS did city's work when I first got on the council 25 years ago.
Yes, sir.
And James has died, and we rebid the project, and Andy was working with him, and A.L. Franks came alive, and they came in and got the bid the second time. And then when John Powell got on the council, he wanted it rebid again, and so it was rebid again with 3 people, candidates at that time, and the city picked A.L. Franks again to be do all the city's engineering work. We can't do any of these projects without it being engineered and approved through the health department and all that. So they have been the engineer for the city. How long have you been?
I've been working in Glenwood since 1998.
When it was
NRS. Yes.
I remember him. He was a young buck, and James had him just doing sidewalk projects at that time. So, but it was fun back in those days when James was alive. But so we have him because we have to have him to do these projects. The next thing I want to discuss that has been discussed is the interest rates on our natural resource loans. The interest rates are lower than what we're looking at on new bond funding, and that's agreed upon. But what everybody is not understanding, and maybe I will let one of those 2 in the center explain, the interest rate that's on natural resource is not what we pay. We pay 1% more on everything we do with natural resource. So if it says it's a 3.5% loan, it's really a 4.5% loan. Because every month anytime you make a payment to natural resource, if it's $100, it's $101 because you got to pay 1%. So that's how their fees are being paid, where these fees are paid. Y'all, Steve, explain that. Would one or two of y'all care to elaborate and explain that a little better than me?
How our fees work?
We're paying fees to both bond companies, whether it comes through natural resource or whether it comes through Stevens, and y'all write the bond work, correct?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that. So just so you understand, whenever you work with ANRC, Arkansas Natural Resources Commission, they charge a 1% administration cost. So if they have an interest rate of a 2.75% or whatever that number is, they're going to tack on a 1% to pay for their staff and to service that particular loan. That is for every individual loan, there's a 1%. The way we're compensated as professionals is whenever a transaction is done. If we go to voters in August and it is voted down, none of us are compensated. The only way we're compensated is if, in fact, there is a transaction done and those monies are to come out of that. And so it's financed in. So if you think about it like when you're buying a house, you pay your financing cost, you roll that into your payment. And it would be the same thing here. And those financing costs have been already taken into account and assumptions have been made in the numbers that you'll see this evening. So when you think about cost of issuance, that's the distinction between the two. When you think about ANRC versus us, you will pay a fee to other professionals along the way as it relates to trustee fees and some other things, but that doesn't have anything to do with the people you see before you tonight. So, but we're happy to kind of break that down or talk about that if that's something we need to discuss this evening.
Okay, so far, in the two matters we've covered, has any of the public got any questions? I'm trying to get everything that's on Facebook Talk brought out so we make sure and have everybody where we understand. We're not trying to hide anything. I want it to be wide open so everybody understands everything and there's not any questions. Pros or cons, we're trying to get the information out there. So on those two issues, are we kind of clear? The third thing that has been on Facebook a bunch is the projects the city has under construction in the street right now. In the street department right now. Right now, we have $1,811,990.25 worth of work being done under contract on the streets today as we speak. We have 4 different projects, and I'm going to go over those, and if y'all have any questions, we want to answer the questions. And Andy may have to jump in and hit me on some of these. The Adams program, which is the first one, is when Glenwood annexed the old 70 highway, everybody knows where the old 70 highway is, there's a bridge out there on it. That became the city's responsibility. And in that same annexation, we annexed some of Rock Creek Cutoff Road. And there's 3 big culverts under the highway out there. Some way those became the city's obligation again. Karen, you worked on filling out a grant, right, for that, and there was $318,000 in grant money that come in to do that project with. The project come in over bid at $72,807. The city has to fix that. There's no way out, and we did get $308,000 worth of grant money instead of having to use $318,000 out of the street fund. We're getting a grant for the $318,000, and the city's got to pay the other $72,807. Okay, that's the first project. There's 2 projects on there. Highway 8 and Park Street is what I've got the sidewalk project classified at, and Broadway to 3rd Street. If anybody been coming to city council meetings for the last 20 years, the city set out a 20-year master plan, and we have copies of that right here in the minutes where we met with the highway department and had public meetings. And these projects were agreed upon 20 years ago. And in the RDOT project fund, when James Rice was alive, he said you need to, the purpose of those projects are to connect your public facilities with your downtown. For instance, from downtown to the post office, from downtown to the city park. The reason 3rd Street got done is we have a depot down there. We haven't run the phase of the project for the depot yet, and we hadn't done Highway 70 from the, if you look at the original master plan, all we like on it is going from the post office, get out on 70, if that was to ever be complete, and go down to the depot that connects the other 2 public facilities. And we connected City Hall. So those projects were all agreed upon. Is that 20?
It was 2002.
2002. These projects have been a continuation. We're through 5 phases of that. This is not something that's just got through out there and out of nowhere the city elected to go do something. This was a well thought out plan. And when you're looking at sidewalk projects, the sidewalk to me is the dressing on top. We're fixing a drainage system as we go along. And we're getting walkways to get people out of our streets. If we don't get some people out of our streets, And to me, the project we're doing right now that's been listed as a highway, the sidewalk to nowhere, is the safest protection we can do, because Highway 8, there is no place to get off the highway and walk without walking on the highway. And I'm tickled to see it, and it does connect our city park. Now, when this started, the project would have went on up to the grade school, because the grade school was a public facility and it's owned past the city park, and we're not going to do that phase because that's no longer part of a public facility up there. So we're not, the city, I don't think, is going to look at phasing that part of the project. The part of the project that was bid there was basically a $500,000 grant. And those are 80-20 matching, and then the engineering fees is on top of that. This project got held up 6 years. How many knows what's happened to inflation in 6 years? So it's come in over bid, but yet you can't go to the highway department and say, hey, I don't want to do any more projects. I don't want to do that project because it come in over bid. We'd like to work with the highway department. If you're going to look on down here, we've got another 2 more projects that they have got funding for. And if you turn back and say, well, that came in over bid, I don't want to do the money, chances of you getting refunded from them is
Not as good as if you was doing the project.
probably not going to get refunded again.
Not like it.
But anyway, and then when Billy T and the council was mayor and I wasn't anywhere around, they did a part of the project that's not on the master plan, but I think it connects the city very well. If y'all look at, if y'all want to pass this sheet around, there's some over there. If you look at everything in red, that's projects that was completed prior to this year. Project in blue is the Highway 8 to Park Street project, and if you look at that, lo and behold, that connects the city park. The sidewalk to nowhere is doing what the original master plan intended to do. And we now have a complete loop tying our city park back to City Hall and downtown city of Glenwood. The next part of the project that Billy T and the council did, I don't know how long, Alan, were y'all working on this, but anyway, it was done sometime in the last 4 years, was Broadway to 3rd Street. I don't know who came up with that idea, but it's probably the best project been done on this sidewalk, because look at what it connected. It connected Broadway and 3rd Street, where we've got our walking trails done, and you're getting curb and gutter, under drain, and you're getting retaining walls on 3rd Street over there, where over Tennessee. If y'all go on Tennessee,
If
it's
it was
not
good,
real.
I was involved in it.
It's a very good project. So, in that project, you had $150,000 worth of grant money applied for, and it come in because of this inflation thing, $91,000 over. Okay? The fourth project the city is involved with today, the city council, the last couple of years applied for a highway paving grant, and this is what we've been talking about in the sales tax. This $300,000 is going to be there from now on in grant money. Now there's 432 Class 2 cities in the state of Arkansas. If all 4 of them, if everybody asked, it'd take you 4 years to get the money. Right now the rotation, because not many cities are asking for that, that is falling back to about every 2 years. Right now, we've got an application in for next year for another grant. We're getting this $300,000 and $83,000 paving project. $300,000 of that's grant. And the city council elected to do the $83,000 because paving costs are up somewhere between 15 and 20% over when these bids were taken. And the council, the highway department said they'd make the contractor hold to the price, and they're going to finish all the stuff that was bid in that project. But we have another one applied for. There's 65 applications in for that right now. There's 85 is what they can fund in a year. And it says December's the cutoff, but June's the cutoff because highway department has to go out and look at all those jobs and get them approved, ready to be bid by December. So June, we've got a real good chance of getting another one of those projects funded next year. If we won't, it'll definitely be funded the next year. But if you look at that, we had $1,297,100 worth of grants coming in the city this year. City's gonna pay out $514,000 for $1,811,990 in work in sidewalks are part of your streets, people. We need the people off of the streets, walking. So I think it's very good money spent. I know there's some people going out saying sidewalks is a waste of money for the city. The sidewalks, if you look at the ones we got, are being used heavily. And I think it's a very good project. And those are the 4 projects that we've got going on in street this year. And I know we've been killed on Facebook about what a waste of money. And I think we're a blessing for the money that we've got in grants and for what we're going to get done. If you look at the paving project, the $300,000 paving project is going to be all over town. The way they wrote that up, I probably wouldn't have done that way, but they're doing about 1 to 2 blocks here, 1 to 2 blocks there. Billy, I think, went out, Billy T, not this Billy, I think went out and he picked what he thought were the absolute worst streets. And instead of paving a whole street, he did 2 blocks here, 1 block there. And so this paving project you're seeing, if you looked at signs up, they're going to come up, for instance, right around City Hall, they're going to get these 2 blocks. And if y'all know those 2 streets, the 2 blocks going down in front of the funeral home to First Street, they look rough. So he's not going past the corner here, but we're going to do that. And if you look at the project, we've got a list of all those that the $300,000 is going to do. We've got a lot of work going to be done on the streets. So does everybody understand or have any questions? I know we've caught a lot of bad slack on the sidewalk to nowhere, but the sidewalk to nowhere is a 20-year master plan. And guys, we can't work on anything more than a master plan up here. If the city gets together and decides that's what you want to do and you develop a master plan, you work off your master plan. And the sidewalk project, other than the Tennessee to 3rd Street, has all been in the master plan. And I think the Tennessee to 3rd Street, if you go over there and look at the street and what it's connecting, is the next best project that we could have done. It's an excellent project. And it's beneficial to us. If we could get to apply for another one today, I'd like to go back on one street that we've got. Personally, I'd like to go back on a street we've already got a sidewalk on. That's Mountain View to the nursing home. Because that's dangerous on that one side of the road we haven't got curb and gutter on. And I would like for the next one to apply for there. But has anybody got any questions on that? Yes, ma'am.
Is this going to be addressed in the meeting because it's on the agenda, or are you?
That's a different project. That's a different project.
Okay, just clarifying. So, is there a specific name for this grant, specific for the sidewalk, or is it all lumped into one grant?
What are those?
Is there a specific?
Those are, they're TAP grants, Transportation Alternative Program, funded through RDOT.
And 2 of those projects are the Highway 8 and Park Street and Broadway and 3rd are where those 2 grant funds come from. The paving project is just is the Highway Department paving project. And that's just simple what it's called, and it's $300,000 if you're happy enough to get in the funding process. You get $300,000 worth of work done. You don't pay any engineering fees. You don't pay anything. The state highway department does it all. We went over on what was drawn up, and the council did elect to do some more paving. And I think it's a good decision because paving's not going down. I'd like for them to approve some more of it when that contractor gets here. If they want to do any more, right now is a good time to do it. But any more questions on that?
One of the things about the $300,000 paving money is that Norman also received that, and so they received that quite a long time ago, and then COVID hit, and then it was put down behind. So, the talk about not using the money, the reason why is because Norman put it out for bid twice and didn't get a taker because once COVID got over enough that people started working again, they were so far behind that it took a long time. We're in with Glenwood on this time, getting our streets finally taken care of.
Yeah, this project, the paving project is the state bid Norman and Glenwood out as one project, so.
So I have a few other questions too, and it's probably been answered at some other time, but before my time. Who's the engineer that's used for the project? Is it A.L. Franks?
We have designed the Arkansas Department of Emergency Management drainage project, which is the bridge rework and the 2 sidewalk projects. As the mayor mentioned, on the paving project, the highway department does it all. We may assist with writing the letter to apply for which streets, but the highway department attends to all of the plan preparation, bid advertisement, and everything.
So they do the bids. It's not a design build. then?
No.
It's okay. And what are the fees for the engineer? 10%, 12%?
It depends on the value of the project.
Okay. Is it a sliding scale?
It is.
Made for public
It
knowledge?
can be made for public. I'll be glad to provide you with one.
Okay.
One thing I would like to say about it, all the work A.L. Franks does for the city of Glenwood, every project he's ever done for us, there's no fee negotiation in it. When Harold Scott first got mayor and James was live, I remember that, he wanted to negotiate the rate. All these projects that the grant money's coming from, there's a design fee and there's an inspection fee that is wrote hard plaid in the contract. It is not negotiable by the engineer nor by the city. If you're gonna get those grant monies, you'll pay. Explain that a little bit better, Andy.
Some of the funding agencies have a set percentage for engineering fees, and the ones who do not, to save discussion and having to justify what the fee is, we use a public fee and never question that. If we can't be successful using the public fee, we need to be doing something else. So that's the fee, and it's published by the Arkansas Natural Resources Commission.
Okay. And so is it a flat fee or is it a
No,
percentage of?
it's a percentage of, but that percentage
It's
varies based on the value of the project.
Well, the bigger the project, the more engineering and the more inspection you
Well,
got.
actually, the larger the value of the project, the smaller the percentage is.
Down 'cause it's-
Right,
because overall-
economy of scale.
Yeah, okay. So, and I'll probably do a public document request on that just out of curiosity. And so other projects, you placed them out for public
Yes,
bid?
yes. Every project we've done for the city of Glenwood has been publicly bid.
And I understand that this is like a matching, the grants that you get from the state are matching?
It's actually a reimbursement.
That's what I was getting at, it's a reimbursement.
Right.
So the city of Glenwood has to basically, and this is my word, float it until,
Right. If the pay estimate or the amount paid to the contractor was $100,000, the city of Glenwood writes a check for $100,000 to the contractor, sends a copy of that check to RDOT. RDOT reimburses $80,000. It's an
okay,
80,
yeah,
80,
I
it's
saw
an
the
80/20.
applications online where you would go and the expense
Right.
sheets that you would submit.
Right.
So anyway, that's all I have. I'll just stop.
Yeah, we've already got our first reimbursement check back from the state on the sidewalk project. The first billing, we've done one billing and we've already got our reimbursement check back from the state, so.
Sometimes it takes a while to get those, so.
The state right now is staying on top of it, 'cause we haven't even done a second billing, we've already got we got our first money in when, Brenda?
Just last week.
Our part coming back on, so.
Well, I will say this, as far as, and I'm just kind of comparatively speaking, I think y'all do a good job with the grants. Whoever's doing the grants or being involved in it.
The lady right there, she's good
To have
at it.
this many grants on the table, I mean, that's really, what, I'm talking about the grants and all.
I said that lady right there, she does a good job.
Whoever does the grants, what I'm trying to say is, it seemed, you just talked about, 4 on the table or 4 projects, and I think for the size of Glenwood and the amount of grant money you get is pretty darn good, it's pretty impressive to me.
Yeah. Andy actually does all the grant work and all on the sidewalks. They do all of it, and Karen helped with Karen, you helped with the Adams grant, didn't you? Or did you do all that? So A.L. Franks did 3 of those bids, and then the paving project, all the city does is fill out a form and send it in, and the highway department does all that, so. It's really, the way they set this money up for Class 2 cities is really nice. on this paving project. All right, any more discussion there on that? Is everybody's mind clear?
You're about a year and a half or 2 years ago, the state could actually pave it cheaper than we could purchase the material, which sounds crazy because normally when you involve the state, it seems like it gets plumb out of hand, but that was the situation for whatever reason.
You know, the way that paving project works, you're getting whatever price McGeorge is giving the state for all the big jobs gets to come back to the small cities. So it's a big difference.
Definitely in our interest to let them do it.
So the next thing we're gonna go on that was discussed on Facebook is Glenwood's done no preparation for the water and sewer projects that we're looking at. And I'm going to turn that over to Andy and let him explain kind of where we are.
Okay. For the ones of you who've heard this, I apologize, but I'm going to repeat myself for, I think, the third time now. The city of Glenwood received a letter from the health department in August of 22 stating that the water treatment plant couldn't produce enough water to keep up based on their criteria, there being the highway department, the health department's criteria. The plant exceeded the capacity, exceeded 80% of the capacity for about 50% of the time for the time period that the health department reviewed the data. So that prompted the health department to send a letter to the city saying you need to look at upgrading the plant. And the upgrade is not to replace broken or worn out equipment, it's to provide equipment that treats or has the ability to treat more water because you need more water. Again, that was August the 3rd of 22 that the city received the letter. August the 24th of 22, we submitted the Water Wastewater Advisory Committee application to get the grant process started, or to get the funding process started, not knowing whether it be grant or loan. Knowing that the work had to be done, we proceeded. Same line of thinking as getting the grant funds for the streets and sidewalk projects. We hope to do the same thing for the water project. So again, within 3 weeks of the city receiving the letter, we had the preliminary report put together and had the preliminary application submitted for the Water Wastewater Advisory Committee. Not only for the water project that was mandated, but also for the wastewater project to replace line work and manholes. At the time, there were two needs, still are two needs actually. One again is the water project at the water treatment plant, and then on the wastewater side, the gravity lines over time crack. They receive infiltration from rainwater, inflow from rainwater, and after a heavy rain, that produces more water at the wastewater treatment plant to be treated. Well, you don't want to pay good money for electricity and chemicals to treat rainwater, so we applied for funding to replace the leaking manholes and the leaking gravity lines. So both of those were submitted to the WAC August the 24th of 2022. So there has been several months of prep work in the projects that we've discussed now for several weeks.
Now then, what we're trying to do from the council's viewpoint, we've talked to Stevens and Friday Eldredge Clark about possibly redoing the city's sales tax to be able to issue, and I'm going to have to explain a little bit right here. The water project has got to be done now, period. The health department, you've already got your letter on it. It's got to be, we've got to get that fixed. We've applied for 2 grants, one of which is how many million and the other is how many million?
Water is 3.7, wastewater is 4.4.
Million. If we were to get lucky and get one or both of those grants, there would be a 75-25 match. So Glenwood would have to come up with 25% of $8 million,
A little over $8 million.
a little over $8 million. Chances of getting both of those funded are probably pretty slim if we were to get one of them funded. I doubt we were to get both. We were shooting broad, trying to get both. Hopefully we'll get both. But they told us in the meetings the other day, and Andy and I were in the same meeting, this money, if you're allowed a grant, you have to have funding in place, and the project has to be complete by 2026.
Has to be under construction by the end of 2023.
And if not completed by 2026, the money has to be paid back.
Right.
The grant money has to be paid back. So what we're trying to do is get ourselves in a position, if we were to get a grant, we get to do both projects. One grant, I think, would have enough money to do both projects. If we don't get a grant, we've got to do the water project, and the money that would be left over out of that grant, or out of the bond issue, then the sewer project would have to be downsized to fit the grant money, or the bond money, excuse me.
Bond proceeds.
Bond proceeds. And you wouldn't get all that work complete, would have to phase that back. And that can be done. It would be nice to get a grant and get both projects done. And that's gonna get your sewer system up where it needs to be. And guess what, people, this water project in a 20-year master plan, what the state is now mandated we do, that has happened, was projected to happen to you 20 years ago. It's in the 20-year master plan. We were supposed to get this work. This isn't new work. Now the sewer line leaking, I don't know how you say it, it came about, it's there. Right now, if it rains, we pump 1 million gallons of water. If y'all looked at the old pond over here and see how full it is, that's 1 million gallons of water that we can pump and put there instead of taking a sewer plant. The rest of it, when they call the city and say, hey, what's this run over the top of my manhole? We haven't got capacity but to pump 1 million gallons of leakage. So the city's in bad shape on its sewer system, needing to get that fixed. Hopefully we can get one, Andy, I believe we could get one grant, we could do both projects.
We could certainly do the water treatment plant project and a large portion of the wastewater collection project. The difference in the two projects is the water treatment plant project has to be done all at once. You can't do one piece of it and still get the result that you're looking for. With the wastewater project, you can replace a few lines here, a few lines there, and still have a benefit to the city. It doesn't all have to be done at once. So if there are funds available to do any or a portion of the wastewater project, you're that much to the good by doing that. Again, all of it doesn't have to be done at once. You can do just a piece of it and still see a benefit.
Okay.
I have a question. Can you, and this is my words because I hate to use this word, can you commingle those proceeds to go to water or sewer, or are they designated to, like the bond specifically says, if it's, and I'm just saying this, if it specifically says sewer, can we take some of that and use it for water? Because I know that the wording is somewhat restrictive on those, and so I'm wondering if you can commingle those.
The bond issue would have to state both for water and sewer projects.
That's right. There would be a designated dollar amount for water projects, a designated dollar amount for sewer projects. You would not be able to commingle those.
Okay, and do we know what those are, or can you do a change order to change that? Like if you've got the bond and you've overestimated one of the others, could Mr. Franks do a change order?
No, because it's the voters that would approve those dollars amounts. So, doing that would involve another. You wouldn't be, as a practical matter, you wouldn't be able to.
But the 1 cent portion would be worded
Water
to
and
do
sewer.
water and or sewer.
The pay-as-you-go portion.
Like
Yes.
for
Yeah.
operation and maintenance of the water and sewer system,
Okay.
and to secure, yes, debt. It would be available to use for debt service, but you'd have a question for the water project with a maximum dollar amount,
Okay.
not to exceed dollar amount, and you'd have a question for the sewer project with a not to exceed dollar amount, and the construction funds for those cannot be commingled.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
One thing it does do sometimes, or it has in other areas, is frees up money that would be spent, so you can stay within the confines of the law. At the same time, it frees up, you know what I'm saying? Frees up money that we were having to do out of one department, by getting the problem fixed instead of having to repeatedly keep going back and.
The dollar amount designated would, if that's possible, would need to be held till the latest date possible to know if we were to get a grant or not. Because if we got one of the grants or other would determine, but the state has, on all this federal money, I don't know how all these other cities are gonna do it. The match part, which we're pretty sure Glenwood's is 25%. But the match part of that, the city, if they applied for this loan, is supposed to have money available for the match part.
So
And you don't have time to go get it.
Yeah.
Other
So,
than,
well, a couple of points on that. So, one, we would have to, like, your city council would have to approve the election ordinances, adopt them, and file them with the county clerk at least 70 days before the election. So that would be May 30th, which I think we talked about having a meeting May 16th. So you'd have to put a dollar amount in the election ordinances by that date. But on the other hand, it's a not to exceed dollar amount. So let's just using like round numbers. If you had, you could say $5 million for your water project. But if you got a grant, you don't have to issue $5 million worth of bonds. Does that make sense? Like when the time comes to issue the bonds, by that point, if you got grant money, you could issue less. Does that make sense?
yes.
Okay.
So then at a later date, if we needed to issue some more bonds, then there was money left there, could there be another project on water, or the voters would have to come in and approve the additional bond issue?
I'm just making up numbers here, so
And
I'm
we
just
all
going to
are
make
right
up
now, 'cause we
something.
don't-
So let's
Yeah.
just say you did a ballot question approving $5 million for water projects. Again, I'm just making that up, and you issued $3 million in water bonds. Okay, you could then go back after the fact, after it's all said and done, and do an additional $2 million bond issue. That after the cost of issuance and everything, you'd net that out. Now, the economies of scale wouldn't be as much because you'd be paying for two separate transactions instead of one transaction. But when you approve a certain dollar amount on your ballot, you are authorized to issue that dollar amount worth of bonds.
Okay, I got some more questions, but let me go back, because one of the questions on Facebook is where did the $4 million bond issue amount that we were looking at come up from? So one of the three of y'all, I think that's going to be down at the end of the table.
Sure. We just, based on our conversations and kind of looking at the different projects, we were picking one project. As you mentioned earlier, one's 4.4, one's 3.7. So we just said if we could cover one project, that $4 million kind of gets us in this. And for those that have been here and those who haven't, the conversations we've had have been somewhat just kind of get our heads around what it is the community wants here. So in the sense of the $4 million, it was us pulling the $4 million number out because it was kind of between the two numbers to ensure that we had enough money available for both projects. Not, from our perspective, not taking any grant monies into account here. So at some point in the future, as they were mentioning, we could do it not to exceed amount of whatever that number is. What we need to make sure, though, from the numbers side of things is making sure that the city can afford it. So we can put a to not exceed amount of a very large number, but the city may never actually be able to issue that because you can't pay it back, right, in terms of your loan. So in terms of the $4 million, that's how we arrived at that particular number, is because the projects are basically that $4 million number. And when we look at affordability and how cash flows come in, which we'll show you here in a little bit in terms of the presentation, That $4 million is a number that we in discussions felt comfortable with because of the fact of how much money will then flow back to other sections or things that have been discussed. So, and we can get into that a little bit later. But
I have one more question, because in the first round of this money that come back in, Glenwood got $171,000 for a project that the state highway department had already funded down here on the water line that they put in when they for relocation of the bridge. And the city filed and got money for what we'd already had funded. And so we're paying that $171,000 back to the highway department to kill that debt. If we issued, and this is a question I don't have, would be, if we issued the 3.7 million for the water project, and then come back in and that got funded, got a grant for 75%, can that technically happen the same way? Could that possibly do the same way the project at the bridge did? They come in and it's ARPA money or whatever you're calling it, say, okay, we're gonna fund 75% of that project because it's in the millworks.
I would be, there's 2 points. I would be very surprised if you'd be able to use grant money to pay off unrelated debt. I don't definitively know the answer to that, but I'd be surprised. And 2, now there is going to be a period of time on the bond issue that the city's not allowed to prepay that. And that's something that the investors are going to demand. The ultimate people that buy the bonds are going to want for a period of time to know that whatever interest rate they've got, they're going to want to know that they're going to get that investment return in exchange for loaning you the money. So there will be a period of time under which you would not be able to prepay those bonds from funds from another source. Now, I'm not sure what that time would be. It would be market driven, and it would be a discussion that, whatever the market would demand, whatever the potential investors would demand at that time, somewhere between 5 and 10 years where you wouldn't be able to prepay the debt. So I think as a practical matter, that would not work. Yeah.
We don't know whether we're gonna qualify for a grant period. Every city in the U.S. is trying to get this money, so whoever gets lucky enough to get one, and we've got $170,000 one already. I don't know whether we're going to qualify for, that'd be a 54, I don't know who could answer that question.
We won't know until they make the determination.
And it would be as far as what it could be used for, that would be in the, in the small print in the deal.
Well, the grants can only be, I know for a fact, the grants can't, they've got to cover the exact scope of the work written.
Right.
Nothing more, nothing less. You can't, it's got to be everything that was in the scope, even if the money wasn't there, right?
Yes.
You got to do the scope of the work, so. It's a lot of questions, and the water project has got to go. It is not, the sewer project is something, I'd love to get a grant on and work on it, but the water project, whether we get a grant or whether we don't, that will either be done in the restructure here, or it'll be done in a water rate increase. Because it's going to be done. You've already got, the paperwork's already in motion with the health department, and I don't know how quick that's got to be done, but I would say before the next 5 years, that project will have to be complete. And you think, you might get up to 5 years, but I don't think it'll be long.
I think that's safe.
I have a question. So, and this is more directed at the public finance people. So, let's just say $4 million that we would ask for a bond. Am I correct in saying, or am I understanding it correct, where the city would take a draw on that? They wouldn't just get that money right away. They would just take that draw, so you would have a maximum amount? Or
No,
would
what-
that funding come right away?
I'm ready to
Can we make interest off of it if we can get that money?
Yeah, absolutely. So I won't get too far into the legal questions, I'll leave that to the lawyers, but from the money standpoint, from the dollar standpoint, when on the day we close a transaction, $4 million will be wired into an account that is managed by a trustee on behalf of the city. That money will sit in that account, and you have, if it's tax exempt, you have up to a 3-year period to spend that money down. While that money sits in an account, it can earn interest up to a certain amount. In our world, it's restricted. It's what we call yield restricted because it's tax exempt monies, and there's a lot of rules that come with tax exempt monies. So that being said, you can earn some interest on this. In this environment, you probably could earn, well, you'd earn a lot more than you've earned in the last few years, right? But that money needs to go towards those projects. In terms of the legal piece of this, the to not exceed amount, what they're saying is if you were to maybe get $4 million and it's offset some of that by the grants, you know, on the ballot, there will be an amount not to exceed. So we could put in the ballot an amount not to exceed $5 million or whatever that number is, but you may only need $3.5 million. So the city's not going to borrow any more than what it needs to accomplish the projects at hand. And that's kind of, so it's kind of two different pieces. So it's not a draw. You get the money, you spend it in accordance with how the project's going to go. And with the monies that are sitting there at the time can earn interest under certain restrictions from the dollars and cents standpoint. And then from a legal standpoint, that's the cap, if you will, in terms of that other piece.
So we have up until the time that it's funded to see if the grants come through. So it's kind of a, you know, a balance.
Yes.
Yeah.
And not to speak out of turn again, but my understanding of the way the grant process is working, it is a timing issue, but you have to have money available in order to provide the match. And so that match, and so it's kind of, we need to have the money there so we can match it if we do get the grant. If we don't get the grant, we need to have the money there because we still need to do the project. And so the question ultimately would be how much does the city actually have to come out of pocket, if you will, rather than coming from another funding source, if that makes sense.
Andy, when did they say the first round of these are going to be announced? Have they gave a date?
I think they said sometime in May, but I don't know that for a fact.
Okay, let me ask a question. Let's say we get on the ballot, it passes. You're not issuing bonds until he gets a bid back from what the project's going to cost, right? The bond, you got to get the bond issue passed, but you're not going to go out and issue the bond until we get a bid in ready to proceed. How does that work?
Yeah, so from our standpoint, we move whenever you're ready to have the money. Now, there might be some legal parameters around that, but from our standpoint, again, it's just like going to the bank and borrowing money. There's a process. It takes a little bit of time, but once you're approved by the voters, we do our process to basically line it up to where you will have the money, we'll pay off the bond issues that are outstanding, and then you'll get the $4 million. That can happen within 3 months of the election, or it could happen within a year of the election. There's no real time restraints from our standpoint. Just from a practical standpoint, what you do have to think about, though, is interest costs. You may not be ready to go, and that's perfectly fine, but if interest rates were to increase, that's the thing that we have no control over. So what we're assuming now are kind of interest rates in today's environment, but a year from now, we might be in a very different situation. So we just don't know that. That's the only outlier.
Well, if the city got the money, I think on the water project, as quick as it knew the money was available, I don't think it would take them long to have the project finished designing and out to bid, but we would need the money before then. So, but that time could be work. If it passes, we're not going to be paying interest on money. You won't proceed on till the engineers got it ready
That's
to
correct.
know the
That's
money.
The only thing the other piece you have to be mindful of, and for those in the community, is that in order to repurpose this tax, you do have 2 bond issues that are secured by the current tax flows. In order to kind of mess with those taxes, we will have to pay those off pretty quickly. So if you need to wait on the $4 million construction amount, that's fine, but just keep in mind that refinancing piece or that restructuring piece will have to take place just so we can
I don't
repurpose
think the
tax.
wait would be long, other than whatever it
Yeah.
takes to get out and get bid on the water.
And that's the assumption we've been working under, but just kind of playing it out a little bit.
Yeah, that's just to reiterate what Jason said. You would, in the restructuring, you would not be able to have those updated usages of the 0.5% tax until the bonds are issued. So
That's right.
whatever that ends up landing on, you're not going to be able to use that half-cent tax money for anything other than debt service on that one bond issue until the new restructuring bonds close. So it's, it's juggling all the different components of the timing, the grant versus the need to use the half-cent collections for other purposes. You're not going to be able to use that half-cent for other purposes until the bond issue closes.
Can you repeat that one more time?
Until the closing on the bond issue occurs, any updated usages of the half-cent tax that are approved by the voters, that wouldn't be effective until the date that the bond issue closes.
And that half cent is what we were talking about, trying to get into the general fund area in order
Yeah.
to help
Right.
pay for other city
Right.
type things, so that.
Right.
Right.
So there's going to be no access to those funds for other purposes until the
bond
financing
issues, those
closes.
are paid off, and then we can use,
Yes.
okay.
We're gonna have to get a yes, yes, yes vote, and I'll let them get into that in a minute. Maybe y'all need to explain, we can't do one without doing both, because they're not tied together completely now, but they've gotta be, the water's gonna be on its own 1 cent, and the other half cent that would be pulled out of the 1 cent and put back over there by itself, where right now sewer's on a half cent, water in the 1 cent is on a half cent, and then the other half cent is in there. And you're gonna restructure it to where water will be 1% by itself, and the other half cent will be by itself, where right now, water and sewer are tied to both bond issues, correct?
And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's nice. So what the city has right now, you've got a 1 cent sales and use tax where 50% of the collections of that tax are allocated to streets. 25% of the collections of that tax are allocated to operation and maintenance of your water and sewer system. And 25% of that sales tax is allocated to pay a bond that was issued in 2004 for water projects. You also have a half-cent sales tax that is, it secures a bond that was issued in 2006 for sewer projects. And the only thing that half-cent can be used for is to pay debt service on that 2006 bond. In order to restructure your existing sales taxes to be able to allocate your sales tax collections to new purposes and to afford these new projects, we have to amend the 1 cent sales tax and refund the 2006 bond and approve we're calling it a new half-cent sales tax, but basically your sales tax rate is not changing. Does that make sense? Okay. And the way I've drafted it, and I do have copies if anyone wants to look at that, but the way I've drafted it is that the 1 cent that you have right now would be used for debt service on bonds and to operate and maintain the water and sewer system. So what happens is your trustee will get the collections of your 1 cent tax. They'll make the bond payments, and then whatever's left will come back to the city to be used for water and sewer purposes. With the half-cent tax, the same thing. It would be used for debt service first, and whatever is left could come back to the city to be used for whatever purposes you guys approve. And I've listed several based on the first public meeting that we had, just based on the feedback that people were giving. I listed public safety, street purposes, park and recreational purposes, and water and sewer purposes. I mean, this is just a starting point that can all be changed. But that was kind of the idea of what I was looking at.
Just to be clear, if I'm understanding
Yes.
our previous conversations and our conversations tonight and everything else, what will be misleading to people that we've got to get past is, at least this is what my comprehension of it is, it's kind of like we had this Sunday dinner and Monday night we have casserole out of this Sunday dinner that was left over, sort of. we need to be able to restructure what we've already got. It's not necessarily a new tax, a new this, new that. It's trying. We've got the right money in the wrong places. Is kind of the way I see it. Am I
Yes.
wrong or
No,
right?
that's a good way to think about it.
Okay.
So
Making you hungry? I grew up
If
in
you
the
did-
country. I thought the Trinity was you get saved, baptized, and eat potluck.
if you're planning, if the city wants to do the water and the sewer project, you would have a total of 6 questions on your ballot. If we're decide to leave off the sewer project for now and just do the water project, you'd have 5 questions on your ballot.
But that don't get the money we need to, that doesn't get the $4.5 million.
Yes,
That's $4 million,
for the water project.
yes.
Yes, it would. So you would have a new half-cent sales tax that can be allocated towards whatever purposes you guys want in debt service. We amend your existing 1-cent tax. We refund your 2004 bonds that are secured by the 1-cent tax. Refund the 2006 bond that's secured by that half-cent tax. Then that half-cent tax goes off the books. That's how we do all this without a tax increase. Then we have a water bond question, and then if you wanted to do it, the sewer bond question.
Okay, that's a little different than what I thought, but it comes around to the same question. You've got to pay off both bonds, but how are you getting rid of one question? Because the water bond is 25% of note payment, or 4% note payment, 1/4% O&M, half a cent street is the way the 1 cent is structured today.
So,
And the sewer bond is all sewer today, the way the bond issues are.
She was talking about the new money, getting rid of the new money sewer question. So that you
Right,
didn't
that's
do-
right.
You didn't do any new sewer improvements.
so if you don't do any new sewer improvements,
Yeah, aren't you
You'd
saying-
have 5 questions.
Isn't what you said, leave out the sewer and give the 4 million to water?
that's right.
That-
Yeah.
Thank you. I understood.
So
Well, the sewer bond issue would still be there because you're having to take that money that's owed on it and put in the refinance. It's not doing away
It's
with
a-
the sewer or water issued bonds we got today. They're just gonna be consolidated and the new money would go towards the water project right now.
Mr. Frank,
Yes.
get the water project, the sewer.
yes, but think about it like this: every purpose has to be voted on separately. So refunding your 2004, that's its own question. Refunding your 2006 bond, that's its own question. New projects for water, that's its own question. New projects for sewer, that's its own question. Does that make sense? So if you decide that you can't afford or don't want to do the sewer project, then you'd have 5 questions. 5 questions. If you do the sewer question and the water question, you have 6 questions.
Well, I don't think you're gonna be able to Andy just got an answer back here. He showed me May the 17th is when we'll know whether or not Glenwood's gonna get either one of the grants. So, that's, right, Andy?
Yes, that's correct.
So May 17th, we'll know whether we qualified for either one of those 2 grants. If not, the water project's gonna have to proceed on, and the sewer project's gonna have to be done piecemeal as you can do it. So, I mean, I don't know how we could adjust that if you got if you got a grant for the water project, not sewer project, you
Yeah,
need.
it would seem to me that you would want the ability to do a sewer project. Number one, if you received a grant, you would certainly
Yeah.
want to do it.
Right.
And number two, if your bid on the water treatment plant project happened to come in lower than estimate, you would have some delta there that you could use on
Yeah.
sewer.
These are options for the city. So but the only thing to keep in mind with that is if you have a question for a sewer project on your ballot and your voters approve it, you have to provide a sewer project. So there won't be any you can't decide at that point not to do the sewer project. Does that make sense?
How
The
much?
dollar amount though, it's gotta be concrete
Would
too,
there,
you're
would there
saying.
be a dollar amount?
It would be,
You could-
it would, whatever marketed, whatever the council says, if you put a vote to this is what you're gonna get at the end of the day, that's the answer.
I get you.
So it
Yeah.
can't mislead.
Yeah.
everybody.
We were talking about the meeting to finalize the way you wanted the wording on the ordinance done, made the
16.
We were, yeah, the 16th.
16th.
That's
The
right.
day before that.
The date, the opening date is the 17th, so we may need to move our council meeting, because on May the 17th, you're gonna know whether Glenwood
Yeah, right.
was gonna get funded on either one of the grant projects.
Would that give us enough time?
It's pushing that.
It's just a wording, it'd just be a change of the wording for y'all if we got a grant project. Would this be a change? Then you'd know the dollar amounts.
I think it would just be filling in a blank
Fill in the blank, yeah.
for the dollar amounts.
Right. And if you're not funded by then you're gonna have to go ahead with the funding for the water project.
Right.
And if they don't wanna do it in let the sales tax redo it, then you're gonna get hit with a water rate increase. If they vote, you can vote this down, if that's what you so desire to do. If you wanna vote all this down, you can vote it all down, and the sales tax isn't going away.
That's right. Nothing will change if
But you
your
can't
voters
do the
vote no
work.
on
All we're doing
everything.
is trying to figure out a way to get the work done without having a water rate increase. There's a lot of questions going on now then. In the wording of the 1 cent tax, let's go back and get that cleared. So everybody, because the half cent discussion that was going to street originally is I think maybe everybody pretty much understands what you need the 1 cent for. Is that pretty clear? Does anybody got any questions on what we'll be trying to tackle different? Then we're going to address the half cent, which basically was, even though it's not that way in the wording right now, the half cent would be what was the street money. And we want some of that to go to streets and possibly a little bit of that to go elsewhere.
Is there any way, well, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
Is there, this is not the final wording, or it is?
No,
Okay,
this is
so-
just
so
this is
it-
just an
there
option.
is-
you know.
it's an option.
This is to get the ball rolling. You know.
Okay, legally, is there a way, because I think what's going to hurt us on a marketing scale, I hate to use that word, but it's, I mean, any project, you gotta sell the project and you gotta be able to explain it. But, I'm personally opposed to any new taxes. The economy don't need it right now. But, having said that, we've got the right money in the wrong places. Is there like when it says adoption of a new 0.5, would it be the same if it said retention of an existing 0.5 cent sales tax?
The only issue with that is that they would be levied under different statutes. So
Okay.
like as far as how the tax actually works and what statute it's levied under, they're totally different. So
Is there a way to have like vote yes for no new taxes and it be in the,
I mean, you
No,
can-
there's, really, that's gonna have to be the city's job of making sure everybody's clear on that.
yeah, boy, it's gonna be a nightmare, ain't it?
It's just, it is, to be perfectly clear, it is a new tax. But it replaces an
An
existing
existing
tax
tax,
that's
right.
levied under a
different
different
statute.
Correct, I
So
understand,
it's,
yeah.
it's worded, it has to be worded with this new language because that's what it is.
I understand.
But that is that's gonna be y'all's role and the city's role is to absolutely make it clear that it's a new tax to replace an old tax with no net tax increase.
That's what all these meetings are supposedly for, but we have to get people here.
Right. Okay, now then,
But on a short, like a short marketing thing, like if we done some billboards or some type of advertisement, could you have like a vote yes for no new taxes? as marketing. I'm talking about marketing, not as in the fine details necessarily, because that would be truthful. Yes to not raising taxes
Yes to not raising taxes might
would be right.
Yes, that would be right.
That would
Yeah,
be
you-
right.
Not new taxes.
Be careful asking a lawyer a question. I might give you the answer that you don't want to hear. If it were me, I would be okay with yes on no new taxes. I would be okay with yes on no tax increase. I'm a little iffier on yes on no new taxes.
Yeah, you
But
said,
I would say-
say that exactly again. What you said.
I would
Intent is an increase, yes.
I would be okay with, no,
Yes on no new taxes.
no, increase. Increase.
Okay, yes
Doesn't-
on
No
Tax, because you're restructuring.
Right.
Yes.
tax increases.
increase.
Okay. Yes on no new tax increase.
No,
I would-
take the
I would
word
take the
new
word
out
new
of it,
out.
Alan.
Yes on
Stop
no
saying
tax
new.
increase.
There you go.
Okay, is that, I'm just trying to get it verbatim, like,
Yeah, I
that's
think-
kind of a general, I'm not saying it's final, but just kind of a general thought. I just was trying to figure out how to explain it to, because, people are going to take snippets of this and that and post it and put a lot of misinformation out there, when in reality, nothing's really going to change the way I see it, other than currently we've got the right money in the wrong places.
And I think that from the city's perspective, what the mayor said is that, yes, something is going to change, the water rates are going to change in order to afford the new
That's
improvements.
605.
So,
Well,
that's-
no.
Just in
without-
order to afford the,
in order, if the bonds, or if everything is voted down, the change is going to be the increase in the water rates to be able to afford the improvements that the state's telling you that you've got to do.
Right, it's got to come
So
from somewhere.
it's going to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
To me, that's the.
Well, that helps
I mean,
a lot.
if I were voting out for it, that's what would get my attention. Is that money's coming from somewhere? Is it going to come from me on my water bill, or is it going to come from the folks that are driving through
Yes.
to help have other people help
Right.
pay?
Right.
Okay.
I'm not a political advisor or anything. I'm not a marketer, so I don't know.
That is pretty much discussed the 1 cent part. It's gotta stay water and sewer, even though it's gonna say, because the sewer part of this is rolling over in a tax that's already paid. That, a bond that's already been issued, we've gotta pay off to reissue. So sewer's still in this, even though it's gonna be classified in the 1 cent difference. That leaves the half cent that was in the 1 cent for sales, for streets. I personally think you're gonna take 1/4 to 3/8 of a cent to stay up with streets. You still gotta do, so I don't care if you designate 1/4, 3/8, but what's 1/8 of a cent showing there? That's the least you can break it down. So 1/8 of a cent generates
108,000 based on
100 and how much?
108,000.
108.
108 or 188?
108.
108, yeah.
And that's based on.
You're not gonna be able to take that half cent and just put in city general and not keep up with your street department. You're getting $172,000 a year from the state that you weren't getting, and you're getting the $300,000 grant money if the city will apply for it somewhere between once every 2 and 4 years. And that money, that grant money is in the statute of that sales tax. It's not going away. If they put that in as that statute for the class 2 cities, that money's staying there, because I don't think the highway department is gonna let that bill be rewritten. It's gotta go back to,
We cannot predict what the legislature
well.
will or will not
it's got-
do.
But anyway, it's probably a pretty good guarantee that that money is staying there. That was not there in the original sales tax when it was put in 22 years ago.
Nobody cares.
And the city turnback money has dropped from Brenda to what it is now. When this sales tax was originally put in, the city general fund was getting $42 a person turn back money a year. That's why when Austin was here and we voted on this, we put the money in street and water and sewer because city general was getting $42 a person. Today, city general is getting $14 a person. The city council has not done anything bad with the money. They just don't have it. It's not coming in. But the state, in taking that money away, did come back and give you some street money. So what we're asking is how y'all would like it worded, and I understand you can't do away with this half cent and put it in city general. You got to have some street money there. The street department's gonna fall apart. There's no question about it. But look up there from 2018, Penny bought in what?
2018, it brought in 505,000.
And last year it bought in?
870,646.
So your sales tax is bringing in more money, not because the city's grown, but because Amazon and all these people are now having to pay sales tax to the city for money that was being spent out of the city. The reason that's grown is because all this online shopping is paying taxes to the entity in which the product's being delivered. You could move some part of that money, of that half cent, and this is what, the 1 cent's not gonna be able to move. You might move some of the half cent into city general to do all the things she's discussed. If you didn't trust the council to do what, I'm fine with the way it used to be. You gotta leave some of it in streets. I don't care if you leave it dedicated streets, you could write the ordinance that way. Go over what was discussed in the first meeting again, that the half cent, or the money that went into city general would have to be addressed. And y'all are suggesting a public meeting once a year of what that monies would be spent for. If you read, and this is movable, it's not, this is what she's got written, it's not concrete, but read what she's got written.
Okay, this was based on the first public meeting and just kind of the feedback I heard from the council and the audience members on what they thought they'd like to be able to have money for. And so it was public safety purposes, street purposes, park and recreational purposes, water and sewer purposes, and then debt service on your bonds. So I didn't assign any percentages to these various purposes so that it would give the council flexibility to, the council would have to put some money into each of those purposes, but it wouldn't dictate how much, if that makes sense. So you could move it around to the different purposes.
Could they add something in there if it wasn't on there? Okay.
Yeah, this is just.
Because
a-
general
Well, I mean, if
fund,
they voted
technically-
on it.
Oh.
If it's voted on for those specific things, like if we have a need for animal control and that's not on there, then can we use we wouldn't be able to. So
That's
that's
right.
the concern with
That's right.
listing everything out.
That's right. So my other option was, which I sort of got the sense that this maybe wouldn't fly, but the other option was just general municipal purposes, and then you
Right.
could decide how to spend the money.
Again, then there's a trust issue, so you have issues with that
That's
as
right.
well.
And so that's really up to
That's what we
question
gotta
for you
decide.
guys.
The council will vote on what we get the best feedback on, and hopefully we've got the right thing for what the people are gonna want us to have on there.
So that sewer and water, does it have to be on there since there's already 1%?
You can take it out of there.
You know what I mean? So that's what I'm saying.
Oh,
So-
we could. Yeah, you could
So
take it out.
if that was
Yeah.
taken out, all those other things sound pretty good, and then maybe something else can be added in its place since there's that 1%'s already going to.
I have a question,
You could. Yeah.
and it's more
Yes,
of a
ma'am.
comment than anything. I mean, the council does have a fiduciary responsibility to the city of Glenwood or the citizens of Glenwood. So there's a trust factor there, okay? So if all this half cent is going to a general fund, and this is just a suggestion, couldn't a preliminary draft, and this is a heavy lift, okay? Because I know how difficult it would be, but could a preliminary draft of the 24 budget be provided, just a draft, provided to the citizens prior to the public vote to gain trust? I mean, just a thought. I mean, because right now, if you had to go to the polls and say, well, $0.50 going to general fund and who knows where they're going to spend it, you know, people kind of go kind of crazy with that. But if you had some sort of preliminary 2024 budget prior, just a draft, prior to that, you could say, okay, well, you know, this is what we're thinking. This is where we're at.
There's not a reason in the world why you couldn't sit down. You could do it tonight. You could sit down and say, okay, if you put that $0.50 there, if you didn't put it, if you put it ironclad in the ballot, the way she read it the first time, the only thing the council can do then is to put, okay, we're gonna put 10% there, 10% there, 10% there, 10% there. If you left it general, it would be up to the council to appropriate. You're still gonna have to have some trust in the council either way you go, whatever way you put it on the ballot.
But I think if there's a good faith effort to say, this is what we're looking at, then the citizens aren't saying, well, they're just gonna lump it all together and spend it like they want, and, you know, minds start going and all that stuff. But if you could actually work with visuals, if you could say, you know, this is what we're thinking, and this is kind of what our budget will look like, nothing set in stone, but we're thinking about this. As a council, we're thinking about these things.
A $0.50 right now is generating, last year generated $435,323. Okay? If you don't leave at least as much as the 2018, a fourth of that would be 250,000. No, I mean half of that. $250,000 is what went into that, to the street fund account in 2018 before the other revenues started coming in. So you gotta, in my opinion, you gotta leave at least $250,000 in street fund. Does everybody get where I'm coming from on that? Streets still gotta be maintained. They're not, even though we're getting 175,000 more than we were. So if you took the 435, and I'm just throwing a number out there, you're wanting it, so let's talk about it. Is that fair? I guess? Because a budget, if you don't put it ironclad in that ordinance, you're gonna have to trust the council each year to come up with that number, because we can do it right now what you want. And this council, I think, this council's gonna be in place for at least 2 more years. 1 more voting session on the budget, because 2 of them would be up for election in a year and a half. Y'all work on at least 1 more budget. I don't think the council would have a problem tonight telling you exactly how you, and somebody made a suggestion, I don't know who it was a while ago, and I don't know if you can put that in the ordinance, they have a public hearing each year to discuss exactly where that money goes. I have no problem. If somebody won't come work on the council with a budget, they have to work with the budget, I don't think there's a councilman here that's got a problem with that. I, as a mayor, sure don't. But City General hadn't had any money to work with. City General's gonna be in the red at the end of the year, guys. It can't be avoided. It's going there this year. And if you don't do something, you're gonna be down to 2 policemen, period. Because that's all the money that's there. And the fire department's not gonna be funded except from what people outside the city limits are paying. Because that's what the budget was set when I got it, when the money that was there this year, and that's all that's there. There's no money that the city of Glenwood, inside the city limits, is paying to support the fire department in the last 5 years' budgets. The rural people that live out of the city limits of Glenwood that's paying rural fire dues in Act 833 money is all the money that's going to the fire department today. It won't sustain that way. I'm sorry, but it won't. Right now in the budget, we've got 3 officers in the budget for policemen. And in that 3 officers, we've got grant money to pay for one of those. It's for 2, but you got grant money to pay for one of those positions equivalent this year. Next year, they said we can apply for the Cops Act again, say we're not gonna keep them, because we're not gonna keep them if we don't get something done. But you're only gonna get to apply for 1 officer, because we don't have 9 officers. So you're not gonna have the police department. And I know we had a guy here the other night, so I don't want any money for the police department, fire department. I don't care if they all go away. I don't really think that's what the citizens of Glenwood want.
He didn't say that about the fire department.
Yeah, he did.
Yes, he
He
did.
sure
He's
did.
against the fire department.
He said, he's against the fire department 100% and against the police department 100%. He sure did. That was his exact words. So whatever you want, if that's what the city wants, don't vote on this sales tax, vote it down, and I can guarantee you, in next year's budget, we're gonna be at 2 police officers and 0 funding for the fire department, because the budget won't take anymore. You can look at it, I'll give it to you, if you can take it home and figure it out, we're willing to listen. But
Hey,
the money's not there.
I set my recliner and reviewed the first, it's been a few years back. I sat there and looked at that budget, and I didn't know anything at all about city stuff, but it made me sick, because, I mean, I'll give you a quick example. We had 600, I believe it was either $644 or $944 budgeted for maintenance on 6 vehicles. I can't keep my daughter's car running 2 months in a row for $644. And this was on 9 vehicles. Well, budgets can be amended throughout the year, so it was basically a play to get it in the black so we could turn in the right thing, you know, to where it would be in the black, and then amend it as we needed to. But I'm sitting there looking at this thing like, where's it going to come from? So you go to this other account, and it ain't there, it ain't there, it ain't there, and it kind of makes you sick, you know, when you're looking at it. It's like looking at your checking account. It's kind of like me and my friends, so I'll be real quick, but me and my friend several years ago was waiting on a big $80,000 or $100,000 check to come in, didn't show up, and we checked the mail, and he said, I said, man, what are we going to do? We're going to have to borrow some money or go get us some money gathered up at the house or something and take it up there. And he said, we'll just check the mail again after a while. That's faith right there.
So you're
It's
saying,
already
like
about
you
10
said,
o'clock in
with
the
the
day.
If it said general, that's could be at our discretion, not really our discretion, but the council's. Because like instance, I'm thinking back here, remember the other day, the animal control come to us, said they're fixing to go broke. We have no money to offer them, so we could allocate to help that out.
Well, that was one of the reasons why we said that, is because after that meeting with the animal control and stuff like that, we have no money in parks, we have no money in animal control. You know, we don't have money for those things. Those are the type of things that the council feels like the city wants. Those are the type of city
If
people
we
tell
market
us.
this right
You know,
and market
That was
better.
covered under general.
Yeah, and you could include, you know, if you're in your laundry list, you could include general municipal purposes, and that could give you like a catch-all, yeah.
And one of the
Yeah.
things that you were saying is if it's on the ballot, money has to be spent on it. Now,
Yes.
not necessarily dollar amount.
Right.
But it'll have to go into our budget meetings.
Yeah,
It'll have to be, they'll have to put some type of money towards it, correct?
yes.
Even if it's just.
If you left the money, if you did the half-cent sales tax, and you put the money that the city was normally used to operating in the street department on, before the sales tax come back in from Amazon and all those people, if you redid this half-cent sales tax, the $250,000, you'd still leave, in my opinion, still gotta have streets. I'd still leave the $250 there. That leaves you $185,000 left. A new fire truck, and we don't need a new fire truck today, but our newest fire truck sitting out there, 15 years old. A new fire truck today is $1 million bill. We got $10,000 in a CD for a new fire truck. How far is that going on a $1 million truck? We don't need a new fire truck today, but their newest truck's 15 years old. We've got 3 of those $1 million babies sitting out there, and we got them on a lot of grant money, and Act 33 money, and we'll still use that to go with it. But you better start putting some money back for a fire truck. Cause a 15, how many of you guys are driving 15-year-old rigs? We got 3 of them out there for the fire department, and they don't need to be, I'm not saying they need to be replaced today. They don't need to be replaced today, but you better get some money in, because they're not gonna last another 15 years.
And the firemen get $10 a fire call, is that
And that's all they're
accurate?
gonna get, they're volunteer, but they
I mean,
got.
that's-
They risk their life for $10.
For
is what you're
$10.
saying?
It don't matter if you're there 10 minutes or 10 hours.
Yeah.
But it's $10. They risk
And
their
that-
life for $10.
And that is that's like a clothing allowance.
It's not paying them anything to go there.
Not
The
paying them
cities-
anything to go, it's to help replace
The
shoes,
clothes they burn
pants,
up
or
for
There we
whatever
go.
you
We
got.
may have to cut their salary in half.
But of the $185,000, if you put one police officer on, that's 75,000, right, Brenda? Right, I'm just throwing the number of time to get insurance and what we're paying today.
Retirement and everything.
Retirement, you're $75,000. That would have us up to 3 officers. So you take $75,000 out of that for one policeman. Now you're at $110,000. You've done nothing for any of those other things you asked for. As long as I've been on the city council, we've never funded a city park. We have 3 of them that people use daily and low. And we've done it out of
Other things.
other things that probably shouldn't have been, but that's the way we've got them done. That leaves you $110,000 if you put one officer in. If you put 2 officers in, you're out of money. This isn't a big thing, but it's just trying to get city general where it can operate in the black. And you need to put some money back on a fire truck, 20 or 30,000 a year. Yes, ma'am?
If you get the COPS grant, they're only gonna fund you $125,000 for a 3-year period. So that is their 75%, then you're gonna have to come up with 25%. So you take that $175,000 and divide it by 3, you're not gonna cover what, the city's out per officer per year.
No.
So, 125,000 is the max for 3 years.
We can't take a COPS grant next year, by what she just told me. You can't take a COPS grant next year and hire a 3rd officer with a COPS grant, because we don't have the 25% match in city general to do it today. So you're going to 2 officers next year unless you do something like we're talking about tonight that's doable without a tax increase. If we don't figure out a way to get this on the ballot to get the community supporting it, we're trying to dodge a water rate increase, and I don't know what that's gonna be on Act 605, but I guarantee you Glenwood is probably one of the best setting cities on rates in the state right now, because we took 5% and 3% rate increases the last few years where other towns haven't. I still don't know what Act 605 is going to shake down at with the audit, but you're not going to know what that is till you get this straightened out. But this will definitely, this $9 million and the $200,000 a year will be out of your basic rate because it's in the sales tax. Is that correct?
Like, yes, would it be taken into account on your
Audit,
Act
on your-
605
on your-
rate study? Yes. Yes, it would.
And right now, we're not
She had
getting
a
full
question.
credit for that the way it was. Who's got a question? Sharon?
It's to you 3. We're talking about land. Not streets, not fire, not put it in the general fund, do whatever you want to do. Forget that. Go back to the 1 cent, okay? If the 1 cent for water and sewer brings in X amount of money, which it does, and we are not changing that, we're not changing that, the sales tax, that's coming in, and we forget about restructuring, because we give it to whoever, or whatever. Just go back to that 1 cent. Isn't this really about, funding a water project? And that's why it goes from 4 million to 9 million, because we're putting the money there for a water project. Isn't that right?
Yes, ma'am. But 5
I didn't
million,
ask you, Billy. I asked them.
Yes, I think the answer is yes, if I'm following your question correctly.
That really, I mean, we've had all these meetings and we've talked about everything and we've agreed and disagreed and tried to figure it out. And, you know, we fuss about fire and police and all of that. But if you leave all of that aside on that half-cent situation, the 1 cent, water and sewer, we're now kind of, I sort of like commingling. We're kind of taking some of the sewer money or putting it all together as 1 cent, not 2 half cents. Or maybe we're not. That's what I don't get.
Yeah,
But
it is.
really, it's all about getting some money to pay for a water project. It's not really, I mean.
Well, I think it's twofold. So we're kind of taking what you have right now, just like what you said, and we have to refinance your existing debt because we want to restructure it. So we want to finance.
Well, we wouldn't have to, would we? If we weren't restructuring, we wouldn't do. It would just keep being. You'd have 1 cent for water and sewer and other whatever. But I'm saying, yeah, that's what I don't understand.
Yes, it has to be restructured because of how it's worded right now. So you have.
If you went with to your point, there's a couple of objectives here, correct? There's a $4 million water project, and there's this idea, correct, and then there's this idea that we need more flexibility in the general fund potentially, right? Okay,
Right.
But if you look at the current breakdown of the tax, you'll see that you have a half cent of that tax that you're currently paying that's going to pay off your current debt, and I'll show you this in a second. And then you have a quarter cent of tax that's going to pay off water debt. So that's just making debt payments. That's all it's doing. So what does that look like? So if you look at this next page, and it's in your presentations for those that are out there, you can see the red box shows what's currently being secured. What we're proposing to do, as you mentioned, what we're proposing to do, which is what we're not, or if you were to keep everything the same, if you kept everything the same, these 2 taxes would remain outstanding, and they would just be pledged to this particular debt. What does that mean? That means that you would still need the $4 million project, though, so that if we did have to pay for that from somewhere, it would have to come out of water and sewer rate increases or water, let's not even say an increase, water and sewer revenues, because you'd have to do it. Whatever that number needs to be, it may take an increase, it may not. We haven't done that analysis. We think it does, but it doesn't matter. So what ends up happening is you're funding that $4 million on its own from water and sewer revenues versus the sales tax revenues. So the question is, and what the discussion is kind of back and forth, is do we take the existing sales tax revenue and reallocate that, which does make the bond issue larger, correct, because we have to pay those 2 bond issues off, but at the same time it's using those existing revenues that are coming in off your sales tax versus this idea of using your water and sewer revenues as what you would be paying for with, if that makes sense. So it's kind of twofold here. So with the assumption that we've got to do this $4 million project, it's got to happen, do you pay it out of your water and sewer revenues or do you pay it out of the sales tax? And in order to pay it out of the sales tax, this is what you have to do to make that happen. To pay it out of your your water and sewer revenues, those are the fees that you as ratepayers pay. You pay your water and sewer bill, there's so much that goes to maintenance and operation, and then whatever's left over you could use to borrow with. And does that get you where you need to be on the $4 million? I'm not sure. We'd have to run the numbers and see. We're making the assumption it would not, just given the fact that you're using those monies to run your operations. But that being said, that's what would happen if we didn't do anything if this was voted down. So
how much of that information is public information to you, where you would know what we're doing in operations and maintenance or annual figures related to Norman and what they're paying, or North Pike County and what they're paying, to see where we are, which citizens do not know.
Sure. Well, and any of us can go out to Arkansas, and you know this already, but go out to your audit website. You can pull the audits down, the audit that's most recently available for water and sewer, and you can look at revenues, expenses, and then what's left over and see how well your system is doing in terms of cash flows. Now, some of those monies, you guys have pledged the sales and use tax, so it might look a little bit inflated because the sales and use tax monies are flowing into your water and sewer operations. So those have to be used for the purposes we've already talked about. But that being said, that's the analysis that has to happen. So anybody could go out. The numbers may be a little bit stale just because by the time the audit agency gets to that and look, it might be that they're from 2020 or 2021. But the reality is that information we can go out and we can look, and anybody that's on their publicly available website. So if you wanted to look at that. So it's kind of two different pieces, I guess, what I'm getting at.
Thank you. I
Sure.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The numbers that he's telling you to look at are posted on the state auditor's website. You are the city of Prince office, the audited financials. The numbers are there.
I asked
For everybody.
Mark up to today, the auditor, she go right in here locally, the auditor said to come and take them all Friday.
You asked today, Sharon, and you called up at about 3 o'clock wanting the city girl to give you all the revenue for Norman and North Pike County for the last 3 years, and she can't grab those just in a group of numbers out. The audit shows everybody as a group because that's what we are. We can't take and throw Norman away, and we can't take and throw North Pike County away. When you were mayor, you agreed to be a regional water supplier. If we're going to get real technical about this, when you did the water loan at the water plant, the paperwork you signed with Natural Resource made the city a regional water supplier. Our obligation as a regional water supplier is to supply water to what the state designated as our region, which is everybody we're covering, plus Langley Lodi, which we're not covering. That's what you agreed on back 30 years ago when we did the water plant. That's what we have to operate under. We can't now take, let's throw Norman out of this picture and throw North Pike County out of this picture. And if we threw those out, Norman is paying a debt of a very high amount. What's y'all's minimum water bill for $1.8 million at Norman? $9,000 for 1,800,000 gallons of water. Because they had to pay the percentage of cost to run that system up there, make improvements at the water plant. For those of you who don't know, Norman paid for the generator at the water plant. Norman paid to reline the filters at the water plant. And Norman paid to upgrade the pumps at what's the road out there? Duck County Line Road? Mountain View Road. Norman paid for all that 100%.
I said wrong. Our bond payment is $9,375. Our total water bill is $12,212.
We keep trying to say Norman's not paying their fair share. Norman's paying, you go back and look at the contract, roughly 70% of that improvement, because they were the water user and it was cheaper than them taking out a loan. So that, we're married there for the next 30 years to 2037 or somewhere along in there is when we're married to on that. And Norman's paying a lot of money for 1,800,000 gallons of water, because they have to pay that. So they're dividing that up by how many customers y'all got? 350 is paying a $9,000 water bill for their water plant.
$12,000 water bill.
But the $9,000 is the note payment for your water, for your part of what you own in this water plant here. Norman owns part of this water plant. They haven't been given anything for free. And let's go to North Pike County, because that's what Sharon don't like to do. I'm gonna go to North Pike County. North Pike County, no, I'm doing what you do on Facebook. North Pike County is sitting here today, and Glenwood ratepayers, if you pay $1 for water, North Pike County's paying $1.20 a thousand for water, and then they're having to resell it to their customers at a higher markup. They're paying 20% to 25% more for water than any customer in the city limits of Glenwood pays. So let's get everybody where we understand and get on an equal playing field. Norman and North Pike County don't have a free ride here. They're paying. Norman is a completely separate contract because the health department said this is what everybody's going to do, and Norman's going to pay that share. North Pike County is not a city resident. They pay for water just like anybody else does outside the city limits, which is a 1.30 multiplier, but they missed some rate increases, and they're at about 120% of what a city resident pays. And then they got to resell the water to their customers. Okay, so no matter what Facebook is saying about Norman and North Pike County not paying their fair share, I beg differ with you. They pay water at a master meter, and then they've got to distribute out their
Buying it
system.
retail and then trying to market.
They're
it.
buying it at retail and then having to mark it up.
That's right.
We don't give North Pike County a big break. They get a break by volume, by working
And
through the gallon
their
volume.
income helps us with our debt service.
Yeah,
on
we
our
pay
bonds.
about $200,000 a year on our note because of North Pike County. And Norman pays their part of the debt service that they're responsible for and their rate, just like was agreed upon years ago. So let's get that clear, and it's not a Norman and North Pike County issue. If we threw them out, Glenwood wouldn't have to do anything. First off, a mayor 30 years ago signed to be a regional water supplier, which we are. Correct?
Yes, sir.
I didn't sign for that. In all the years I was a council, I dealt with an administrative order and a 20-year master plan that come out from under administrative order of Sharon and Reggie's and Marlon Davis's day. And the city is paid for water rates because water rates were too cheap 40 years ago. And guess what? If you didn't have money 40 years ago to pay for it, you still got to pay for it today. When Austin put the sales tax on, Brenda, the first $200,000 of sales tax that come in paid for Sheridan, Reggie, and Marlon's debts that were not paid for. We hadn't paid an electric bill in years. We'd pay a 4-year-old electric bill to get the electric bill to stay on when Austin Swindle got here. That's how bad the city was. So let's throw all that in the trash can and figure out what we got to do move forward. Because I can't go back there and keep rehashing this stuff. It's over with. We're dealt with what we have to deal with right here. We can either get together and work and figure out how to make this work and hopefully not have any more rate increase in water. We can definitely save $4 million. Andy, go over that letter one more time, make sure everybody understands. This is not an option of the water project. This is not something Billy Plyler wants to do. That letter is from the health department.
Previous mayor got that letter.
Yeah,
Right.
it was actually, the letter's dated August 3rd, 2022, and it says that the city has exceeded its 80% daily capacity for 21 of the previous 42 months. And that prompted the health department to send this letter saying that you're required to do an upgrade. They allowed in the interim for the city to re-rate the filters, which they're going through the re-rating process now from 2.5 gallons per minute per square foot to 3, which will help. But they say that is and I'll read it. They said that's a stopgap option while other major upgrades to the plant are investigated. So it's not a question of do you have to do it. It's when do you do it, and you have to do it now.
I have a comment. So this is really a water issue, not a sewer issue, right? The pressing issue.
Yes.
The
Right,
most
correct.
pressing, yes.
Okay, so if this goes on the ballot,
The sewer, we can do it in increments.
in every,
To a
right,
certain
we
point,
can
yeah.
overtime and have that plan. As a voter, I would, and I know the answer to this. If we do this and comply with the state and we have our rate study provider come in 2026, from what I understand, based on the number of citizens in the city, there's no guarantee. I mean, so we can't go out to voters and say, oh, you're not gonna have a rate increase or whatever. You have to watch those words. You have to say more than likely, or we're trying to avoid, or something like that, because we don't know what that rate study provider is gonna come up with, even if we do approve this bond.
What this bond does do is guarantee that the $4 million upgrade that this is going to require is not going to be in the rate. It's going to be in the sales tax. You can go to the voter and say that money is not going to be in the rate because it's going to be right? It's gonna be guaranteed in the sales tax. So you can go to the voter and say, we know that this $4 million upgrade is not gonna be in your increase in rate.
Right, not in your tax rate. I'm talking about the water rate. If the water providers, the rate study providers come in, even with this money, and they still say, you're not charging enough to take care of maintenance and operation. This takes care of getting it in compliance.
If this passes the way it's being discussed, there will be no increase in taxes or water rate to pay for this $4 million project.
But are we
Period.
in compliance with the rate study going forward?
The rate study hasn't been completed yet.
That's right, but it's gonna be in 2026. I mean, I'm looking forward. You can't, there's no guarantee.
So you would, I would think that you would want to pull at least a known $4 million debt from either taxes or rates and put it on this where it's not costing anyone anything additional.
I see what you're saying.
Right now.
I see what you're saying. That 4 million won't be taken into consideration at all. Like right now, if we had that $4 million, they're gonna see the rate and it's gonna be out of the roof. But that $4 million will be taken out of the equation when they do a rate study, so it's a better chance that we won't have a rate increase.
A better chance, a better chance.
It could.
You will not have a rate increase
Just because.
on the $4 million part of this project.
Yeah.
Because that's gonna be covered in the sales tax. We can argue all day long about an unknown of what our rate will look like. There's not many cities setting in the financial position Glenwood is, and we got money in the CD, in our account. I'm not sitting here saying we don't. We've got reserves like every city's supposed to have. I'm gonna ask Andy this question again. I asked him this the other night. How many cities are putting their, well, let's ask Norman, they're here.
Yeah.
How much of your, how many years, how much money have y'all got in y'all's depreciation and reserve account?
So our depreciation in our reserve account is not fully funded. One of them has $10,000 in it. Excuse me. Karen's trying to kill me. One has $10,000 in it, it's supposed to have 18, and once it gets to 18, it will be fully funded. The other one is just about the same amount. I believe it's around $8,000 or $9,000, but we just started this year because of 605 funding a refurbishment account with 5%.
And Glenwood has been in a refurbishment 5% account for 10 years already, where most cities in the state have not. Right now, we've got $2 million in the bank in water and sewer because of what it's done to get there. Guess what? We've got that money in the bank. Cities that don't are going to have that money in the bank because they're going to put it in the rate. We've already worked on that, and Glenwood's rate increase is going to be a whole lot less than a lot of other cities are because we have those reserves and we've been acting properly the last 18, 20 years. We've been getting the monies in there that belong in there, and that's showing in the account. And it's going to reflect in your rate structure. I'm not saying the rate's not going to go up. What's inflation doing right now? Whatever your inflation rate is, I can guarantee you water and sewer rates are going to follow. There's not avoiding that. There's nothing you can do about that.
You can't go to the voters and say there won't be a rate increase, because I've heard that several times from a lot of
There
people.
won't be a rate increase on the $4 million.
I understand that. The tax
That's a
is
big
the
deal.
same. I understand that. I'm looking forward. You can't make a commitment to the public and say there's not gonna be an increase when there could be. There could be. No matter
There
how
will be
slight.
on inflation, but there will not ever be on the $4 million project.
I understand that. That's what I'm saying. You can't go to the voters and say that there won't be a rate increase, because there might be.
Did you have a
Misinterpretation on the
comment?
voter themselves, is what she's trying to
Right.
say.
Yeah.
You know,
No, I understand what she's saying.
And here was the question that I was trying to ask when we got back in history, and I wasn't here 42 years ago to do all this. So my question is, nobody is, we've got people we love in Norman, we have people who live in Kirby, and that's all we're talking about. we're talking about the city of Glenwood taxpayers and the water and sewer users in Glenwood, which is about 864 or so. But when those contracts were done, the water contracts for Norman and for North Pike County, the city attorney was the city attorney for Glenwood and also for Norman. Really problematic, but that's a fact. So, in the contract, it says if Norman burned down and everybody left, the taxpayers of the city of Glenwood, the water and sewer, it has to be paid back. You borrowed the money, you have to pay it back. So that was my concern was, just say there are 350 customers, as Billy said, in Norman. I don't know about North Pike County. My only reason for calling it 2:30, not 3, was how many more or less people are there in those two cities? My guess is North Pike County with the lakes, we're probably better off, okay? But still, you're not being adversarial or negative to say, somewhere down the line, will anyone understand that the ultimate debt on this will not be, ultimately, would be the city of Glenwood and Glenwood taxpayers? Does that make sense?
I think so. I mean,
Seems
the
to me
city-
like we should have thought of that before we become a regional water supplier. Go ahead.
Well, see, but that's.
Well, the
being
city,
cute,
if you
that's
issue
just
a-
buying another building without paying.
If you issue sales tax bonds, it's the city's responsibility to pay it back with your sales tax collections. So yes, the people who pay sales tax collections in the city
And
of
the people
Glenwood.
of these communities and the people coming up here renting a cabin on the lake are paying the sales tax as well as us. The sales tax is getting, a lot more people pay sales tax than just the citizens of Glenwood and the city of Glenwood. I can guarantee you that.
No one's arguing that.
And so the sales tax is a much more, you can't put all the water rate in the sales tax, but I mean, everybody that comes through the city is paying a sales tax on water and sewer with the sales tax. So, is there any other questions? We've got a city council meeting we still got to do tonight after we get through this, but I want all the questions answered. And we're going to come back one more meeting. Can we, if that meeting date is you said 17th.
17.
If we're going to get it on the ballot, we'd know 17th whether we're going to get or not going to get a grant.
Could you hold your city council meeting on the 18th?
Could we hold it? What's everybody's schedule look like on the 18th? Could we move it from the 16th to the 18th?
I'm a morning person. I'll take
Huh?
that. Doesn't matter. Always first.
May the 18th, we would know on the 17th if the city's going to qualify for a grant.
I can do it.
Is the 18th?
That's Center Point's graduation. I won't be here. My son graduates.
Oh, that's true. We
Never
have
mind.
done
Okay, what's the next night? I mean, what?
I can't do it.
Then does it have to be filed with the
It's gotta be filed with the
county
county
clerk?
What days it got to be filed?
For the 30th.
Okay, what's about, let's look at the calendar. What's the 19th?
Friday.
Good call.
Just thought of it.
Save on that.
Oh, yeah, trouble.
Yeah, I'd be.
I mean, you could do it on the 17th too.
You could.
We could do it on the 17th. We could do it on the 19th. We could do it on the 22nd, right?
No pressure, no pressure.
Somebody give me a date. We need to move off the 16th for a final.
17th or the 22nd is fine.
Yeah, that'd be my.
Y'all pick it.
Say that one more time.
Huh?
17th.
Yeah, we're kind of, we got conflict.
It just needs to be
17th, they got conflicts on the 22nd, so
17th is church night.
it is, but we're gonna have to,
For a lot of people.
we teach Awana as well, so, I mean, we're gonna have to
I'd
get
prefer the second.
that
If it's
switched
the,
over.
I mean, you know, if
We'll have
it's,
to what
if it's a
now?
special
I'm gonna have to
meeting,
get that
you
covered.
could meet earlier than 6 o'clock.
can't meet
if that
on
would.
Ma'am.
Yeah.
They got a conference on the
22nd.
22nd.
The 17th, you're gonna know, was that was graduation?
18th is
Graduation.
graduation.
Okay, can you do you'd know, will they announce by the 17th, you'd know on that day?
Their commission meeting is 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning. So, yeah.
Oh,
like-
that's
We could do it on the
Billy, I mean,
17th,
Billy,
we'll know.
Just the 18th doesn't, I mean, I'm not being mean, I don't have to be here for a public meeting.
right.
This would
We
be,
wouldn't be here
So-
because we all have
We
kids
have kids
graduating.
graduating, so I mean.
Well, y'all gotta be here, well, we need y'all
That
here.
we-
this would be at the council meeting
Be
where you
outnumbered.
adopt the
Adopt it, well,
ordinance.
then we
This
have-
adopted an ordinance, y'all gotta be here for
Then
that.
we'd have to have 2/3.
Technically, I don't have
voting
to,
for
so,
You get to go.
yeah, I get
So
it.
what's our options, Billy? One more time.
I'll videotape it.
17th
Okay,
or 19th, I
the
don't want to be there.
17th or 19th,
This is graduating.
could you do it on 23rd? Because that's pushing for y'all.
I can do it if it's, I have a meeting in Little Rock until 2:30 that day.
That's plenty of time.
And Jimmy
So,
works, so we
I
can do
can-
that.
Okay, let's get back to where, I need to, the council's gotta be here for this meeting.
I done told 17th, I told you, 17th or 22nd. Sorry.
Okay, 17 or 22nd?
So
They have
17th.
conflict on the 22nd.
I don't
They
have
got
to-
a conflict on the 22nd?
I don't have to be here necessarily, so I mean, you just need to.
What about the 17th? Is everybody cool with the 17th?
Y'all have a
That
quorum,
day, yeah,
y'all
one of
very
them.
good. I'm not sure on myself just yet on the 17th. I mean, I can't tell you on that short notice, I guess is what I'm saying, but if y'all got a.
That's
quorum-
May, that's not this month, that's
Right,
next month.
right.
But it falls on a Wednesday, which is
Church night.
church night, so.
I understand.
Well, no, I'm just letting you know, that's one of the issues. I mean, we'll be able to get that covered, but
Well, it's not that that's holding me back. I was just trying to, it's pretty
There's
far out
three
in
of
my
us, there'll be
schedule.
three of us.
I got a lot of we got a lot of graduations, a lot of family in Oklahoma, just a whole lot, some weddings, some stuff going on.
There'll be
I'm
three.
gonna have to check with my wife. She's kind of runs this thing.
17th?
I know what you mean.
And we'll have to have 2/3 of the
So
council
we
in
need three.
attendance.
So you've gotta have at least three.
So if he doesn't show up, it's 3 of us.
Yeah.
Everybody good? 17th?
17th.
Okay. Council meeting to change the 17th. I don't like it on a Wednesday night, but you're backed into these dates are not very flexible for when you hold the election on over in, when was it?
August
August the,
8th.
We're doing 6 o'clock, is that what time we're
What time you
going?
will meet on
We
the
need to
17th?
order.
what, is 6 o'clock still fine with everybody?
Whatever.
6 o'clock?
I don't want to drive.
It's fine, that's fine with us.
Does anybody in the audience have any more questions on the repurposing of the sales tax? We'll have one more meeting on the 24th. If y'all got any more questions,
Any ideas on how to get more involvement? I know I've asked that a few times, but do you guys have any other ideas on how to get more city involvement? Anybody?
Until everyone works together, trying to get people here for the right reasons.
Well, I mean, the right reason for me is for
I
everybody
meant
to
to
hear,
listen
to actually
and not
hear,
argue.
you know, to hear what it is being said, you know, so they actually get the truth of the matter. Is what the reason I would like people to hear, but
Excuse me, I don't think there's been any arguments. I think this has been great conversation.
I
I've learned
wasn't
a lot.
talking about tonight.
I mean, I've learned a lot. Thank you.
I wasn't talking about tonight, the other meetings.
I'll say this, Sharon don't like me. Y'all know that. I wish there was some way in this situation we could get it to where we could do what's best for Glenwood.
You would bring that up right here at the end.
Hey, it's the issue that's on
I make a motion
Facebook.
we adjourn.
We ain't even started, we didn't even adjourn.
Anyway, we need to figure out a way to get that where we can get along. For the betterment of Glenwood.
I think it's sad that we had to spend some time tonight trying to figure out a way for people to trust good people that had nothing to do with whatever made the distrust in Glenwood County.
Amen.
And that's our problem. Just because you're the city council does not mean that we cannot trust you.
I trust them every time I eat there. They're not gonna poison me. I trust Billy and Chris every time I ask them anything in the store because they're not gonna send me home with the wrong thing. They're gonna make my house blow up when I hook my hot water heater up. So what is it about, why do people want to distrust our council now because of what happened whenever? I mean, you know, it's just, it really bothers me because I love Glenwood, and until everyone works together with a humbling attitude and a caring attitude for Glenwood, it's not gonna change.
Amen.
Okay, I'm off my soapbox, so I'll go ahead and dismiss.
Good, Mama.
Anything else? Let's take a 5-minute break and we'll go into the council meeting.
What day is he doing